Greetings War Thunderers, this is Longshot with a quick look at the state of arcade now that 1.59's been around long enough to assess its effect on gameplay. In this video I'll be showing a quick game flying the F2A3 Buffalo in a Tier 1 lineup. But the purpose of this video is to share my views on where War Thunder Arcade is now and where I think it's heading, assuming the Gaijin don't make significant changes to the mode and also to the bearing that has on the future of this YouTube channel. So firstly, what did the matchmaker give us here? Yes, it's a ground strike, which is no surprise to me at all, for reasons I'll explain a little later on. As usual, I start off by gaining altitude, and as the Buffalo is barely travelling over 300 km an hour when it spawns, it's not long before I'm down to its sustained climbing speed of around 260 km an hour, and I'll just pause it there for a moment. See that plane in the distance flown by Apollo Tabletop? It's a P-47, and it's not the only one. There's another P-47 on my team, and at least one more on the enemy side. I'm pointing them out because these are Tier 3 planes and I'm in a Tier 1 lineup. According to the long-standing matchmaking rules in War Thunder, I should not see a plane more than one tier above my own, and as I'm flying in a Tier 1 lineup, that means I should only see at most Tier 2 planes. However, this changed very recently. Gaijin dropped the tier restriction and is now using battle rating alone. And yes, that means P-47s in particular can wreak havoc against lowly Tier 1 planes due to their absurdly low battle rating. Now generally I don't care that much about matchmaking. As you'd have seen from my up-tiering videos, I've taken the approach that in arcade, skill can overcome or at the very least nullify a difference in equipment. But a lot of new players are going to suffer due to this change because of the increase in clubbing that'll result from it, and I expect it won't encourage them to stick with the game. Anyway, I'm approaching a D-17 and he immediately noses down into a dive. And this of course creates the dilemma faced by every fighter pilot when a bomber dives to ground level. Should I follow him down or not? If I follow him, I may or may not get the kill, but I have very little chance of getting him before he bombs his target. And once he's shot down, I'll be looking at a long climb back up to altitude while he can just respawn straight away in a new bomber at 4,000 meters and get ready to dive bomb another target while I'm still clambering back up to altitude. Now of course, this is a light targets game, so there are no bases to bomb, and in fact every ground target can be strafed by fighters. Plus they'll self-destruct over time to force the game to end in about 10 minutes, even if nobody plays the objectives at all. But the point I'm making is that it's gradually become very difficult to play the objectives in Ground Strike by defending, by flying a fighter and shooting down bombers and attackers, or by escorting bombers and clearing the sky for them and shooting down planes that try to attack them. As successive patches have reduced the number of ground targets, and especially with the increase in the strength of bomber damage models in 1.59, the balance has shifted in favour of ground pounders. That means if you're not directly engaged in attacking ground targets yourself, you're hurting your team's chances of winning, no matter what else it is that you're trying to do. Air combat is pretty much irrelevant now in ground strike missions. In the past, I'd have sadly shaken my head at this P-400 as he strafes a column of armoured cars, thinking he'd be better off using his plane as a fighter, but not anymore. By flying low and attacking defenceless environmental targets that don't fight back, which really doesn't require any skill at all, he is being far more effective than I am in my role of trying to shoot him down. Apollo Tabletop is still up there in his P-47 with his altitude superiority, but I'm afraid that nothing he does up there is relevant anymore. He will have no greater effect on the battle than I will, as I attempt to stop enemies from getting to my armoured cars down at low altitude. And here's my next target, a Junkers 88, and as I've regained a bit of altitude I'll have enough speed to dive and run him down, but not before he gets his bombs away. And once again, a guy who's dived from spawn in a straight line and hits the spacebar over AI targets is doing far more for his team than I could ever do as a defensive fighter. This will be my first kill in this battle, not because I set him alight or ripped off a wing, but because I was lucky enough to shoot through his plane and kill the pilot. 50 cals weren't very effective before patch 1.59, but since that patch they've lost a lot of their hitting power and their ability to set fires has diminished too. But in 1.61 it looks like it's going to get even worse, which means you can pretty much give up on flying many American fighters in arcade. Now, they say they're basing this on historical documentation, but 4 or 6 50 cals was considered perfectly adequate for most American fighters during and after the war, even into the start of the Jet Age, and that would not have been the case if they were as weak and useless as they currently are in War Thunder, let alone what War Thunder has in store in the next patch. Anyway, my next target is an A20, which I have very little hope of shooting down, now that these guns rarely start fires. I do spend a while pinging away at him, and it feels like I'm shooting blanks, and that's the common experience with 50 cals now. And if it's this frustrating with a manoeuvrable plane like the Buffalo, I can only imagine what it's like with a P-51D or the first Bearcat. Anyway, his AI gunner is chipping away at me as well, and I guess back when 50s were more powerful, I might have been shot down by now. But I do take some wing damage, which will handicap me later on. Eventually, I get the inevitable assist. Okay, so now I'm at ground level, in the middle of the battlefield, and I've gotten here by mindless furballing? No, I've been trying to play the objectives by stopping the ground attackers. And I've had no impact on the game whatsoever, so I may as well indulge in some furballing. My team only has around 11 ground targets left, so the game probably hasn't long to go anyway. If I really wanted to win the battle, and I'm putting quotes around the word win, I'd be better off strafing armoured cars myself. But that's what I started doing late in 2012 when I first discovered War Thunder. It might be enjoyable for some people to keep doing that for month after month, but for me, the novelty of shooting armoured cars wore off within a few weeks, and I switched to air combat as it was so much more interesting. And after getting so much fun out of air combat in arcade for so long a period, and learning so many techniques and methods for different aircraft, the last thing I want to do is just go back to ground pounding with everything. If that's what the game is coming to, I'd rather not play. But back to the battle for a moment. I'm extending away, but I'm about to be jumped by a Key 61. Here he comes, so I pull to the side with a sharp turn, switch to a loop and a bit of a roll. I'm looking to make him overshoot. He cuts back with a scissors, so now we're in a dogfight on equal energy terms, except I'm fighting my own plane due to that wing damage, and I lose sight of where my opponent is for a few seconds, and that could have ended badly. But even with a damaged wing, I reckon I'll have outturned him. He switches back and ducks underneath, and again my plane is fighting against me as I try to follow him. I get guns on him this time though. And yes, there's proof that these bullets can still occasionally start a fire, although we'll have to wait and see whether that'll be possible in patch 1.61. I was in a pretty good position for a shot at this float zero, but couldn't land a solid hit, mostly because once again I'm fighting the effect of the wing damage on my plane's handling. Then I overshoot, and soon I'll suffer the fate that can befall any plane furballing at low altitude, which is to be taken out by an interceptor that I didn't even see. There's no point respawning in this battle as it's about to end, so I'll skip ahead to the results. It went for just over 8 minutes, of which 30 seconds was the loading time, allow another minute after spawning before meeting the enemy, so the real battle time was a princely 6 minutes 30 seconds. In a fighter, unless you furball like a maniac, that's just not enough time to do anything really, as can be seen by the results. I feel like I hardly did anything much, but only one player scored more kills, Zarano there with 4 and 5 ground targets at the cost of 2 planes. Apollo Tabletop at high altitude only managed 3 kills. The real stars of the show were the grass cutters, going after the hapless AI targets and ignoring air combat altogether. All of them lost planes in the process, but the thing is that because there's so few ground targets, they could force a win before blowing through their lineup, and it's that which makes defence untenable in this game now. It usedn't to be that way when I first started playing War Thunder, but they've gradually changed the game so that the best strategies are the ones requiring the least imagination and skill, which is the opposite of how it should be if you want a game to have depth and keep players coming back for more. Imagine how incredibly short these battles would become if everyone played the objectives and raced each other to shoot tanks. Most battles would be over within 3 minutes. And it's not like things get any better at higher tiers. It's the same no matter what tier you play in arcade. In fact, it's gotten to the point where I'd happily opt out of Ground Strike and its variants altogether. That's Frontline and Assault. I'd be much happier if I could just play Domination and Air Domination, and leave the ground pounders to their short, meaningless battles. I could tolerate it if the game gave us map types in equal proportion, but even that's not the case. Looking back over my recordings, it's just one tedious ground strike after another. Occasionally I get a domination to relieve the monotony, but I haven't seen an air dom since January, which was the one I showed at the end of my A6M montage video. And I'm not alone in this. In fact, here's a post from a guy on the forums who conducted a more scientific study over hundreds of games to see how often each game type occurs. It's a sad story. So in a nutshell, I no longer find arcade enjoyable. Now, of course, the obvious alternative is RB, but after a couple of serious attempts, I just haven't been able to get into that mode. And it's not because of the realistic flight models or the wing snapping. I really enjoy those aspects of RB. Rather, it's the lack of action in many battles and the time commitment involved. In arcade, I could jump into a battle and get involved within a few minutes. In RB, that's rarely the case. I remember one night playing RB, where every target was shot down or crashed before I could reach it, or where I always ended up alone against an entire enemy team. In 2 hours of gameplay that night, I had a single kill to show for my trouble, and that's just not the kind of game I'm looking to play. So the upshot is that I find myself no longer playing War Thunder. What does that mean for this channel? At present, I'm not sure, as I prefer to keep this a game-based channel if I can, but right now I'm not playing any games at all. There's none out there that really grab me at the moment. I have started a separate channel where I look at Forex trading, a link to which you can find in the description text below, and I was thinking of setting up another channel for reviews of movies and TV shows or something of that nature, but for this channel I just don't know. I guess it's up to Gaijin. Only they can make changes to the game to bring back the fun and get me playing it again. So what do you think? Please let me know in the comments, both about the game itself or any ideas you might have for other types of videos I could create. I really do enjoy making videos and interacting with everyone. I'd really miss that if I stopped altogether, so I'd like to fill the hole currently left by War Thunder with something that you, my viewers, would enjoy watching. But I'll leave it there for this video. Thanks everyone for your support. I will not say goodbye because I don't want to give up on War Thunder or gaming in general just yet. Hopefully one day soon the game will improve, and once again I'll see you in the skies.